Former police officer Kimberly Potter has been convicted, and she's been found guilty on 2 charges of manslaughter, both first-degree and second-degree manslaughter in the state of Minnesota. This has to do with the fatal shooting of 20-year-old Daunte Wright. Here is the judge reading the verdict, and of course you see her face and her expression as she learns that she will be spending some time behind bars.
We, the jury, on the charge of manslaughter in the first degree while committing a misdemeanor on or about April 11, 2021 in Hennepin County, state of Minnesota, find the defendant guilty. And the verdict was agreed to at the hour of 11:40 a.m. and signed by the jury person on 12/23/21. The verdict on count 2 is we, the jury, on the charge of manslaughter in the second degree, culpable negligence on or about April 11, 2021 in Hennepin County, state of Minnesota, find the defendant guilty.
Now, some are a little surprised that she was found guilty of first-degree manslaughter, and I'll explain what went on there in just a moment. But to give you some context into this shooting, which took place in April of this year, the jury of 12 did take more than 27 hours over 4 days to reach the unanimous guilty verdicts for Kimberly Potter. In fact, they reached the guilty verdict for second-degree manslaughter 2 days ago, and just today they had the unanimous guilty verdict for first-degree manslaughter as well. Potter is the 49-year-old white woman who testified that she had never fired her gun on the police force in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, until April 11th, when she shot a single bullet into the chest of Daunte Wright, a 20-year-old black man who had been driving to a car wash. Now, she was taken into custody and she's being held without bail. Obviously, she's been convicted. Her defense attorney was asking that, what she did was an accident. We shouldn't put her in custody immediately. We should wait until she's sentenced. But the judge didn't buy that argument. Now, here's the reaction from Daunte Wright's family as this verdict was read.
Find the defendant guilty.
Now, here's what happened during the trial, okay? So initially, she was charged with just second-degree manslaughter. But last September, following pressure from Daunte Wright's family and the community, the prosecutors decided to also charge her with first-degree manslaughter. Some of the things to consider is the fact that she had actually, she was supposed to use her taser, right? She meant to reach for her taser. She alleges that she accidentally reached for her gun. The fact that it was an accident apparently wasn't really contested, but she held the gun in her hand between 5 to 6 seconds before shooting it, right? So that seemed to play some role in terms of what the jury was deliberating on. The jury concluded Potter also was a veteran cop. She had been on the force for 26 years and had extensive training with the taser. So there is a possibility, obviously I'm speculating here, that the jurors didn't necessarily buy the argument that it was an accident, considering how long she was holding the gun and how much training she had with tasers, considering the fact she had been on the force for 26 years. Now, here's what happened during that shooting. A judge had previously issued an arrest warrant for Daunte Wright because he failed to show up to a court date on a charge involving an illegal weapon, okay? So there was a warrant out for his arrest, but that is not why the cops stopped him. So Potter was actually riding with a rookie officer by the name of Anthony Lucky when they saw Daunte Wright driving a white Buick. Apparently, he had an air freshener in his rear view window, which is illegal in Minnesota. And so they wanted to pull him over for that. And then they also alleged that he had expired registration stickers. Now, as the cops were trying to arrest him, body camera videos from April 11th showed that Wright had gotten back into the driver's seat of his car after pulling away from another officer who was trying to handcuff him. Potter testified that in the moments before the shooting, she had seen the third officer at the scene, Sergeant Michael Johnson, leaning into the car, and that he had a look of fear on his face. Okay, so here's how that all went down. The video is a little difficult to watch, but here's how the shooting happened.
During that traffic stop in April, officers tried to arrest Wright for a misdemeanor warrant.
You're under arrest, Dante.
That body camera footage belonging to Officer Michael Johnson. You see him open the passenger door as Wright struggles with the officer Potter was training. Johnson attempts to put the car in park as Wright gets shot, all in a matter of seconds.
And then what happened? And then I heard a loud pop.
So that loud pop, of course, was the single gunshot that she fired, and that hit him in the chest and killed him. By the way, he was in the driver's side of the car, and after shooting him, he drove a very short distance, a little over 400 feet, and collided with another vehicle. So by shooting him, she put others in danger as well. Potter is heard shouting that she was going to stun Wright with her taser, but she had actually drawn her department-issued Glock. She yelled, "Taser, taser, taser," and pulled the trigger. Then, realizing that she had shot him instead, Potter shouted she had grabbed the wrong weapon, collapsed to the ground, and sobbed as she said she was going to go to prison. And so there was an argument made by prosecutors that she was more concerned about having made a mistake and how that would have implications for her future, as opposed to being concerned about killing someone and actually issuing, some care to him after he had been shot. One more video, and then Cenk, I want to get your reaction.
The prosecution presenting this new video as it makes its case against former Brooklyn Center police officer Kim Potter, showing the moments right after she shot and killed Daunte Wright. Potter saying she meant to use her taser.
Oh my God, what have I done?
An officer on the scene fearing Potter would harm herself.
Kim, I'm gonna take this but give you mine, okay?
No, just let me kill myself, Mike.
No, that's not happening, Kim.
Apparently it was happening. Okay, I think she said she was going to prison there.
She said she wanted to die, basically.
Oh
yeah.
No, that's of course. The second officer doing the right thing there and consoling her. Okay, so guys, there's a bunch of interesting ramifications of this and reasons why it happened. So number one, Keith Ellison is the Attorney General in Minnesota. And when Keith Ellison dropped out of Congress, he was the first Muslim congressman in American history to run for the head of the DNC. I thought, well, that's a bold move, and I doubt they'll let a progressive be the head of the DNC. And then he had a big lead, and as with all progressives, all the establishment spent time, money attacking him, used the press to attack him, and then they basically stole that election from him. Okay, you can say they won it, you can't say they won it fair and square, but they put in a corporate lackey who did nothing, and you did the usual. Oh, and Keith Ellison will help us, and he'll be vice chair, whatever the hell BS title they gave him, and it was pointless. And so then eventually Ellison, frustrated, realizing they had screwed him, and that they did not intend to lead together with him. That was always a trick. I can't believe any progressive ever falls for that. Anyways, decided that he was going to run for Attorney General in Minnesota, and I thought that was just a bizarre choice, to be honest. Okay, boy was I wrong. Keith Ellison going to Minnesota to be Attorney General has made a gigantic difference. Look, you can put progressives anywhere, and sometimes it makes a huge difference. The George Floyd death and Derek Chauvin's trial, Minnesota. Potter's trial, Minnesota. Justice, Minnesota. Justice in both cases. Would a regular, either Republican or establishment Democrat have pursued those cases as aggressively and as competently? Well, it would be borderline shocking. So if Ellison hadn't gone there, I don't know that we would have gotten either of those convictions. So I want to thank him for doing a bold and apparently really smart move that made a big difference in the country. Now, I think the most important part of this trial is the message is now getting very clear to police across the country. When you go to shoot someone, you better be careful, okay? Because cops will be absolutely outraged by this decision. And by the way, they are already in Minnesota and elsewhere. And her supervising officer is now no longer at that position because he refused to fire her. And he said in the trial she did everything right. How could she have done everything right? The guy is dead. He said, oh, that's exactly a police procedure. It's exactly a police procedure to kill people. It's absurd. It's insane, right? And here is a jury of her peers saying, no, that was not right procedure. That guy who shouldn't have been dead is dead because of your negligence, which led to this manslaughter.
Yes, and hold that thought because I want to add some meat to what you're saying. While her superior, who refused to fire her and then later stepped down because of his refusal to fire her, argues that she did everything right and she followed protocol. The prosecutors actually made a convincing argument that it is not protocol and she did not do the right thing. Let's go to graphic 5 here, where the New York Times reports that prosecutors argued that Potter, in meaning to use her taser, had consciously risked harming Wright because her police department's policies warned against using a taser on someone who is driving a car. So the argument that they're making there is, even if she didn't make that mistake of using the gun instead of the taser, she wasn't even supposed to use the taser because of the fact that Wright was behind the wheel, right? And she could have actually caused harm to others in deploying any kind of weapon. So let me read the rest of that graphic to you. The prosecutors who work in the office of the Minnesota Attorney General, Keith Ellison, also said that Sergeant Johnson had not been at risk of being dragged because only a small part of his body was in the car when Potter had fired. You can see his arms, reaching in the car, but you don't see like half of his body like in the car to the point where if Wright drove away, he'd be dragged on the road.
Well, that part is really important too. Why? Because in all previous cases of my lifetime, cops would just say, I thought there was 1% and 1% and 1% chance that I might be slightly harmed, and jurors would say not guilty, right? The judge would say not guilty. Everybody would say, the media would say not guilty. Oh my God, that guy could have gotten a hangnail. Are you crazy? Of course he shot and killed him. We're done with it, right? Now jurors are saying, no, we're not persuaded that there was a tiny % chance that if he drove off, that your partner might be slightly injured, and that's why you had to kill him, and he's dead now, right? No, that we're not persuaded. You're going to jail. That's a giant booming sound across the country, and it's a clear signal to the police. You better be careful. You're not allowed to just wantonly kill people and go, whatever, I felt like I was in slight danger, or that other dude was in a tiny bit of danger, and I pulled the wrong one. Who cares? Who cares? My life is more important than everybody else's life. Well, turns out, new day in America, that might not be the case. And that's why you'll see cops outraged, because they think that they're above the law and that their lives are infinitely more valuable than ours. I love that this sent the opposite message. But I wanna make something very clear. From our perspective, this is not like the Rittenhouse case in that there's nothing to get upset or to celebrate here, right? So it's good for justice, but it isn't a thing like, oh, Potter's a terrible person and we got her and that'll show her. No, she made a terrible mistake, it cost someone's life, and now there's justice. But the entire thing is a terrible tragedy for everyone involved. So,
yeah.
And by the way, don't get me wrong, I don't see anyone on the left going ha to Potter, because we're not like the bad guys.
So one of the decisions that the defense made in this case that was risky, and I think ultimately it didn't help Potter clearly, was that she decided to take the stand herself. And in taking the stand, I think it became abundantly clear that she made a mistake. But again, the state asked the jurors to avoid thinking about what her intentions might be, right? And focus on what the ramifications of her actions were. And so her tears here, while they might be compelling to some people, did not play a role in the jury's decision. Nonetheless, here she is talking about what happened that day. Oh, we don't have that video, my bad, we don't have that video. But she did take the stand, she was tearful, it was an incredibly emotional moment. And then one final thing I did want to bring up is her sentencing. She has not been sentenced yet. She has been convicted of those 2 charges, 1st-degree and 2nd-degree manslaughter. The standard sentence for the more serious charge, 1st-degree manslaughter, is within the range of about 6 to 8 years and 6 to 8.5 years in prison. The maximum penalty is 15 years, and prosecutors have indicated that they will ask the judge to hand down a longer than average prison term. So we don't know the exact date the judge will hand down the sentence, but she is looking at quite some time behind bars. There is also a possibility that she could, because of the fact that she doesn't have a criminal record, the judge might use her discretion in offering a lower sentence. So we'll see what happens.
It looks like they're gonna go for a lower sentence, but the message is already delivered, and that's the important part. And guys, speaking of the message, look, think about it too, right? They pulled him over because of a wrong turn signal. There is a tiny percentage of cases where that might be dangerous, but it is really rare for that to be significant. And then an air freshener and expired registration sticker. Now, if you're white, you might not know that is what black people in this country get pulled over for all the time. Is it because the people with air fresheners are more likely to be criminals? No, it's called any old excuse to pull a black person over. And then in that moment, you're now in a potential confrontation with police, thereby risking your life. Now that's, again, part of white privilege. You don't get pulled over for that 9 out of 10 times. So you have no idea that black people are actually getting pulled over for that nonsense. And they're not getting pulled over because the cops actually worried about the air freshener. They're getting pulled over because they're black. And so that was also important in this case. And maybe, just maybe, our police in this country might actually pull over people who are dangerous instead of people with air fresheners as an excuse to target minorities. So that's why it's more good news on the justice side here. And final thing.
But let's also keep it real. I mean, he had expired tags, okay? And on top of that, they didn't know it at the time. He did have a warrant out for his arrest.
No, going to arrest him when he has a warrant out for his arrest is perfectly fine and normal and would happen to, I hope, everybody, unless they're super rich, right? In that point, then there are no rules, right? So, but pulling him over for expired registration sticker and an air freshener.
That has happened to me.
Okay, so it does happen.
Registration
I guarantee you it happens more to African Americans.
Sure, I don't deny that, but I do think that expired registration stickers is a justified cause for pulling someone over. The air freshener thing is ridiculous. I would be shocked if most people living in Minnesota even know that that's outlawed. But yeah.
But again, guys, these are telltale signs of I'd like to pull a black person over. Yes, it does happen from time to time to white people and others, right? But it happens at a far more significant rate, and it's because it's an excuse. All right, now last thing is.
By the way, my registration wasn't expired. I was just too lazy to put the new stickers on. Just keeping it real. Well, I had my husband do it for me.
Okay, all right. Well, that's an entitlement of a different sort. Okay, and a privilege of a different sort. All right, look, super last thing. Gabby Merida, one of our members, wrote in saying, well, it's a good thing they took her in right away because her lawyers wanted her out while they were appealing, etc. Because she said, then now Tucker Carlson can't do another propaganda documentary. But I don't think he would have. The reaction from the right is interesting here. Rittenhouse was celebrated as a hero. She was kind of left on her own and didn't get a lot of support, even though her case is arguably, as good as Rittenhouse's, right? I mean, in the past, the cop makes a mistake, the right wing would have been all over celebrating her. So I thought it was curious that they didn't. Here's my theory on it, for what it's worth. When a lot of those right wingers are young males, and when they saw Rittenhouse, they relate to him. With Potter, she's a middle-aged mom, or I don't know if she's a mom, to be fair, a middle-aged woman. Maybe they don't relate to her.
No,
right?
I think there's something to that, but there's also the fact that what the intent was. Like in the case of Potter, she very clearly fumbled, she made a massive mistake. She had an accident, right? And in the case of Kyle Rittenhouse, they see him as a hero because he presented himself as someone who's going to Kenosha, Wisconsin to protect small businesses and all of that.
Well, that's exactly where I was going.
Yeah,
I think that's okay. I think the gender and the age is a little bit less relevant. The more relevant part is Rittenhouse was going to basically own the libs. Oh, I'm gonna go in there with a weapon, I'm gonna intimidate them. Oh, it turns out I used it and killed them. Okay, and to the right wing, that's a massive win. They think that's awesome, and they relate to him, and that's why they cheer for him. They celebrate him. He went to go own the libs, and he wound up killing the libs. That's great, right? Oh, she just made a mistake. She didn't even mean to kill that guy. That's not as interesting. So that's the state of the right wing today, and that's why Potter, I don't think, got as much attention and celebration as Rittenhouse did on the right. Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.